Welcome everybody. So here we are at Old Sarum with the FLYINGIRON Spitfire with D-Day stripes. We're going to look at some historic airfields of the New Forest today. Old Sarum is actually a World War I airfield, significant history, and among other notable uses, it has it had a factory for the Edgeley Optica, which is very popular on Microsoft Flight Simulator. But we're gonna just take off in the Spitfire. We're gonna be very careful with the rudder because this thing is exceptionally sensitive. It's very difficult to do a good takeoff in the Spitfire. Wheels and get some speed going. So we're up. So a fair bit of rudder trim needs to come in. We'll deal with that in a minute. Yeah, as the satellite photo shows, there's a lot of development going on here. The future of Old Sarum's a little bit uncertain. However, I think there's planning for some properties. I think they're going to go in and field at the end here. I might be slightly wrong, but they may well have some kind of airside link, or there's scope for airfield development as well as housing, which would be interesting. It would be so cool to have a flat or a home that you could then access the hangar that you keep your aircraft in off the back of it or something like that. That would be amazing. A bit like those communities you have in Florida, in the convenience of somewhere like Salisbury, which isn't too far from London, and you can go off and have lots of adventures. But I'm hammering away in this Spitfire at the moment. Let me get things under control and we'll head in the right direction. So up ahead of us here is a series of lakes. This is known as Ibsley Lakes, and it's a bit of a visual reference point for entry to the circuit at Bournemouth Airport. But it has a bit of history in that it was once itself an airfield. It was RAF Ibsley. There's not a lot of it left now, but we'll have a little look to see if we can identify from the air any kind of evidence that it was once here. There's not a lot. If we turn this way, try and show you something if I can see effectively on the satellite image. Now, that bit there and that bit there are the only two bits of runway left. So there's a diagonal runway and a runway coming along this line here. That building there is actually the old control tower, and it's still there in a kind of skeletal, derelict state, which has been quite heavily graffitied. And there's probably a few other bits and pieces in the woods around the surround of the airfield, but that's it. That's all the evidence that it was once there. And Spitfires, Hawker Hurricanes flew out of there. I think there may have been a US Army Air Force presence as well around D-Day, as there was with quite a lot of these, which we'll go into in a moment's time. But next stop isn't too far away. We're going to have a quick look at Bournemouth. Obviously Bournemouth International Airport is heavily developed as a modern airfield. However, it was once RAF Hearn during wartime, and it was extensively developed upon. So here is Bournemouth Airport. Now there's not a lot, particularly from the air, that you can tell, but there's these are the little dispersal pans here. There's little sort of circular lollipop shapes that they would hide bombers on in the woods. There's quite a few of them around here, and it is that kind of classic A shape. So that used to be a runway. This used to be a runway, but it's been so significantly developed. You have to kind of go off on a bit of a wander to find any of the sort of the original buildings. They are there. There's original hangars as well, particularly on that side of the airfield. There's old hangars and huts and stuff in the woods around here as well, linked to its previous history. But if we push on down here, we're approaching this little village here, which is called Winkton. This was a practice for advanced landing grounds for June 1944. What they did was they kind of rehearsed here what they would do in occupied France, so that they could establish landing sites for aircraft that would be using it. So the US Army Air Force moved in with Thunderbolts to test out the theory. It was, see where this sort of triangular shaped forest is here with this lake? Now the airfields ran one along this side and one along this side. But there's literally nothing here that you could tell. There wasn't any concrete runways, it was all Marston mats. Sort of corrugated, well not corrugated, but sort of metal panels with holes in it to provide a sort of a structured surface that even on sort of soft wet mud and stuff you'd be able to grip. I'll put a picture up so you can see it. But yeah, it was here. So as we follow the Avon River, continuing with Salisbury behind us, we're approaching Christchurch. Christchurch too was very important to the war effort because there was factories here. There was companies like Airspeed and Avro who had factories here. And you can see this industrial estate. Even today it still has its original use. However, back in the 1940s, well prior to that, even into pre-war, this section here had an airfield and it ran all the way down to this main road here. So there was a grass strip which went in two different directions. However, it wasn't big enough for use by warbirds, and so therefore the US Army Air Force put in another airstrip which ran through this gap in the river here. So the runway kind of started in this corner here where these houses are, and it goes along through that gap. It's really hard to see. You would never know it had been there, but again, I'll put up some pictures to help reference what it used to look like. Again, there's literally no evidence that it was there really. There are a couple of factories which are of the time, and in these woods here there is a Type 22 machine gun pillbox, which is still in position on the woods. There's a building, I think it's this one here, near that roundabout. That's probably the only one that I can think of that is still present in a lot of the older pictures. But creating a bit more of a noticeable impression on the landscape, we're going to move towards Holmesley South, which isn't too far from the Winkton grounds. There is a group called FONFA, the Friends of New Forest Airfields. They have a website which is well worth checking out. They do have a visitor centre with lots of information. They know an awful lot more about this sort of stuff than I do, but please check it out. It's probably worth me mentioning at this point that because of the acidity of concrete during construction, it can affect the soil underneath, and this in turn means that nothing really grows where it's been. So you can see the runways, in fact there's a little bit still, and there's dispersal pans here that you can see that are being used as part of this caravan site on this side as well. But you have this kind of ghost of an airfield in that the trees and the bushes that are growing grow around it but not actually on it because of the acidity in the soil. So it's quite kind of eerie in a way that that's how it is. But we're going to head on towards Lymington now. So as we now head towards Lymington, we're going to have a look at another advanced landing ground. So this was another rehearsal, another test of the technology on setting up shop and having a working airfield that you could run ground attack fighters from in occupied France. And on the run up to D-Day, it clearly had a lot of use because they were very busy at some of these major airfields around here, so they could kind of split the traffic and use this real estate that they created for themselves. So this is Lymington. You can get the ferry from here, which takes you to the Isle of Wight on that side. There's the Needles, quite famously on that side, but over here is the ferry terminal. There is a tiny bit of evidence that along this line here there was RAF Lymington. Now the farmer that owns this bit of land here, you'll notice there's a private airstrip, and this building here is actually one of the original sort of Nissan huts, like a corrugated sort of semicircular building, which was left over from the construction and has survived. So there is a tiny bit of it that is still present, so it's cool that it's seen some use post-war. But we're now in a really good position to have a look at another scar on the landscape deep within New Forest here. This is RAF Bewley. This is another really useful visual referencing point for aircraft flying around, particularly general aviation, if you can keep it below 2,000 feet because of Southampton's controlled airspace up ahead. There is a little bit of concrete still. Dispersal pans. I think there's a water tower here somewhere as well, I've heard, but I've not actually seen it myself. And this is the village of East Boulder, and on this section here, now Microsoft Flight Simulator seems to have built a building on it, but you can see BEA, it's upside down at the minute, but it says Bewley in chalk, and this side of the road was where the original World War One airfield was, but it was too small for use in World War Two, so they built another sort of classic A shape. And again, due to the acidity, nothing has really grown over where the runways were, so you've got this kind of ghost airfield effect again. We'll just pull ourselves around here. So some common aircraft types that were flying around this area during sort of 1944 included Thunderbolts, Hawker Typhoons, Martin B-26 Marauders, Mosquitoes, of course Spitfires, and even I think P-61 Black Widows for a short period. So as we move away from the coast, with Southampton off to our east here, you can already see another ghost airfield here. This is Stony Cross. Many people will kind of go past it and not even realise it's there, because this is the main A31 road that links into the M27, just a few miles ahead. But again, it's another good visual reference point for pilots, and it's another former sort of US Army Air Force base as well. It's here right by sort of Rufus Stone, this kind of area. Yeah, there's that main road. But again, from the ground, you don't really notice it, kind of, especially going past in the car. But there's all these dispersal pans again used as a sort of a campsite. And the runways have all been ripped up, but nothing grows where they once were. So that's, again, really cool that it's there. It's kind of a tribute to those who, many set off from these places never to return. But up ahead here there is another very interesting location that I want to show you. Now you can see this kind of weird white spot here. This is actually the Ashley Walk bombing range. I'll show you a few pictures I've taken. Some from the sky, some from the ground of this area. It's riddled with bomb craters. You can see like cross shapes which are used as bombing targets. There's like a sort of circular pattern around this big target point here. Over here, this shape here, this is actually a building that they created to simulate the U-boat pens at places like I think there's one in Bordeaux in France, and a few other places. But that perfectly circular hole there, that's actually a crater from a Grand Slam bomb, one of Barnes Wallace's inventions. And they even did, speaking of Barnes Wallace, they did bouncing bomb testing. Some of that was done with a Mosquito. There's footage. You can see that white building in the background. I think they kind of came in from this direction, and they built a wall over here somewhere, and were bouncing the bombs across the dirt. There are other features here. A lot of them aren't kind of visible in Microsoft Flight Simulator, but you can definitely see all the holes. You can see all the craters are visible from this image that's been used. Definitely a very interesting place to visit if you get the chance. We're lined up nicely here to kind of walk our way back up. You can see Salisbury Cathedral in the distance is rendered. I run Flight Simulator at quite a low setting, so I know it isn't as great as it would look on some people's machines. It's not obviously rendering at that distance anything else of significant note, but I'm on a 5-year-old machine here. I'm running a NVIDIA 1060 which does me just fine actually for everything that I need Microsoft Flight Simulator to do. It'll do. I appreciate some people have had problems with faster cards. I seem to be alright so far, touch wood, and I'll obviously continue to provide content for as long as people want it. So as I head back to Old Sarum to conclude, thank you very much for your time. If you've got anything that you'd like to share of knowledge or anything I haven't covered, or if you think there's anything that you would like me to do for a follow-up video or anything else, by all means give me a shout. You're better off heading to the actual Old Sarum, which is here, and using that as your kind of base leg point. Tease it in, tease it in, tease it in. Don't ground loop it. I don't want to press the brakes because I don't want to. We've come to a bit of a halt, but that'll do. Clear of the runway. I'm quite happy with that. Well, thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed that.